All right, welcome in. Thank you very much for being here. Look, I don't even know how often I do this, Dan. Usually I'm the one that just gets on, and here you are, part of the intro here.
I know. It's very exciting.
I appreciate you being here, brother. Thank you to everybody that's tuning in right now. Obviously, a recorded show on this morning, but thank you for being here. Please subscribe to the channel if you don't mind, and a shout out here to Dan Woike of the LA Times for taking some time. So, Dan, I appreciate it, brother. Thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure. It is an exciting, strange time here in my tenure around the Lakers. Like, there's no playing basketball for me to care about. It's really weird. It's really, really strange.
Yeah, I was just asking you too before we came on. I'm like, what do you get like a week off where you're not traveling and you're not on a plane and you're not, back and forth and everything else? I'm sure that's not normal for you.
No, I have a list of like household chores basically to get to in addition to like work stuff, right? Like it's like this is a great week to do your expenses. Like we have my wife bought like a different like sort of like haul tree like from Wayfair type of item that's been sitting by our front door in a giant box for a month and a half. That seems like something that might get tackled here before game one. We all playoff prep very differently, Alan. You know, this is like one of the JJ Redick and I are very different in this way. He's like breaking down film. I'm literally breaking down boxes. That's the difference.
I was gonna say I could see, and I have no idea if your wife watches the games, if she cares or she doesn't. But I could see her being like so invested in the final week, saying just stay out of the playing tournament because I got so many things for Dan to do once this week starts that he gets his week off.
Yeah, it's very it is very personal. Like, how do I want to put it? Her rooting interests are like very like selfishly driven, and this is true. This is true for a lot of people. Like one of the things that my dad used to get a kick out of when he would ask me about the teams I covered, he would ask me like what I was cheering for to happen. And my answer generally was the same, which was no overtime. That like I'm not an hourly employee. Like that, like the thing that I care about most is that we get this done in a timely fashion.
There you go.
Right? Like, but yeah, it's there's basically a no overtime version of this through my wife's eyes, which was like her preference would be that obviously that the Lakers would not be in the playoffs, that the season would be over, that I would be home now until
she gets her husband back.
Yeah, well, I always try to remind her she thinks she wants that, but she really doesn't. Like she doesn't really want that yet. Like
she wants it. She wants it, but then like 3 weeks later, she's like, "When is training camp? What is training
100%. It's like, are you sure you don't need to go to Vegas for summer league like in June? Get out there a little early.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, we got obviously a lot to hit on.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's going to be exciting to obviously get game one under our belt coming up this Saturday. Before I jump into the playoffs, I tried doing this, and I think it's so easy to just turn the page and it's like, hey, playoffs start this Saturday. Let's forget about the 82 game stretch that the Lakers just went on. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think here because you've covered other NBA teams, because you've been around the NBA for so long. Have you experienced this wild of a regular season where for the Lakers specifically, it could be the Dan Hurley might be the coach of the Lakers. It could be drafting Bronny James. It could be, obviously once the season starts, trades start to happen. The LA Fires, like it feels like there was about 4 or 5 seasons in this one. What was your experience over the 82 games?
Yeah, I mean, I had thought, Alan, that this was going to be a pretty important season for the Lakers. Just obviously a new coach, like charting would seem like was going to be the last sort of gasp of what, the LeBron James era was with the Lakers, trying to figure out what the next path is going to be, this kind of interesting crossroads that the team sort of found itself in. It seemed like a pivotal year. I expected none of what happened to actually happen, like in that way. It was wild. I mean, the closest, right, is the, 2019-20 season is the closest. Right, where that season starts with like the team stuck in China.
Sure, that's right.
Right, you know what I mean, and stuff like that. And then obviously, the tragedy with Kobe Bryant, the pandemic happening, basketball restarting under, really trying circumstances. I mean, that's the closest in terms of like thrown for curveballs in season. This is wild. Like, I mean, it was funny. I was watching the Lakers workout on the court in Portland. And when I say the Lakers, I mean everybody who didn't play, minus LeBron and Luka, who weren't in Portland. And just like the energy and the bounce and like the
Mm.
vibe around Dorian Finney-Smith and like just different guys, Jordan Goodwin, like guys that have become really important to this team. Jared Vanderbilt's out there running around, Gabe Vincent. Like these guys, I mean, Gabe played earlier this year, but like at the end of last season, like, these guys weren't either on the team or they weren't healthy. It was funny starting to break down kind of the previous games with Minnesota this season. They're almost all useless because of
I agree.
how different the teams are
Mhm.
and the players that mattered most in these different games and stuff like that. And it's, like there have been 3-4 different versions of the Lakers that have existed this year. And I think if you're looking for reasons of optimism, like I do think this is the best version of the Lakers, the current version. And I think that they've been successful in multiple iterations of this team, which to me speaks to adaptability in the playoffs. That's a big part of it, right? Is like there's the way you want to play and there's the way you can play. And figuring out kind of the where those roads intersect is the key to navigating long playoff series and stuff like that. And so I think in that way, like, yeah, it's been an insane season. It's been simultaneously crazy long, but because so much has happened, it's gone by really quickly. And I'm excited for whatever comes next.
You mentioned some of the chemistry. I think you think people are making too big of a deal, and I think you would have a better pulse for this than anybody. Lakers play at Dallas, and Luka has his tribute, and you could tell that the team really. It felt like the team. I know it's late in the season. But obviously that wasn't just a normal regular season game. Chemistry of what do you think it is walking into the playoffs, and how much do you think that game specifically did that have an effect? Do you think brought the guys maybe potentially even a little closer?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question about it. I wrote a pretty extended story about it. It wasn't even to me the tribute. It was, kind of what came after it on the court. And the way, the moment that stuck out to me was the way that LeBron and Luka kind of embraced as Luka checked out. That it wasn't like just sort of like your general. It's hard to really explain this, Alan, but it was like there was like enough of like a grasp and like a hug that it was the way you'd hug someone you cared about. It wasn't just like a quick one. It wasn't like long and prolonged and off. Like it was just like it felt like two people that were connected, right? And I think LeBron, even though their experiences in playing return games are very, very different. This was not the. I mean, I guess this would probably be closest to LeBron's first game in Cleveland as a Laker. Is anything else where the crowd still likes you, but like not even quite like this even. But I think LeBron, had some empathy for the moment, and he gave me an incredible quote. Here, I'm trying to see if I can pull this up here. I can read this because I think it's worth getting at because it was the kind of thing that he said that I was like, oh my gosh, this team is really locked in. Like in a way that like I'm not totally sure I understood before. He said, I've been in a lot of moments in my career. I played against some former teammates. I played against former teams. I've been booed. I've been cheered. I've been whatever. Everything. I've seen it all. And the one thing you can't ever undermine is just the emotion behind a human. And as much emotion that was going on tonight, as much hoopla was going on and how much the game of basketball wrapped around it all, the human side kicked in. Not only for Luka, but for our ball club and for me. Which, to me, it was like, yeah, they absolutely got closer in that game. And we're like, this team has been through, can I briefly curse? Is that allowed?
Oh, you can. Yeah. This team's
been through this team's been through a lot of bullshit this season. In a lot of ways. I don't know that the Luka version of the team had like been through some hard stuff, like in that way, like truly. I guess, look, yeah, you lose at the buzzer in Chicago. Like they've had hard games. Don't get me wrong on that front, but like nothing like this, right? Like nothing really, really like with the emotional weight of this, and like seeing your teammate be vulnerable, seeing him as you're trying to still like people really like Luka, right, within the Lakers, but it was too early to like love him and like really like be like that connected because they're still learning, and to like that's the type of stuff like when you go through, it's not traumatic, but like a serious event, and this is true in relationships and stuff like that. If you have something early like that, this is why so many people like linked up during COVID, like in the early days of COVID. You go through lockdown with someone, like you're gonna come through it tighter. Like it's just like the reality of it, and I think like there was an element of that that day where they went through an event together. They came out on the other end of it. They all like Luka delivered on the promise of the moment.
Sure.
The Lakers had his back and delivered when they needed to secure the win. And they were able to like kind of all exhale together. And I think it started off, and I wrote this, it started off as like a night about Luka. It ended as a night about the Lakers for me. So yeah, I don't think that is overrated at all.
Kind of taking that, and obviously a perfect transition to getting ready for the postseason here. So they wrap up the regular season. They win 50 games. They get a chance to rest everybody against Portland. They get about a week off. I think 1 week to the dot here until they play Minnesota coming up on Saturday. What's your initial thoughts about this series? Because what I'm seeing a lot of is I don't know if underestimating is the right way to put it, but this kind of comes with the territory. I don't think people are really looking at Minnesota as being much of a headache this series, which I would caution. But at the same time, I also feel like JJ's not going to underestimate them. I don't feel like the Lakers will underestimate them. I more feel like it's the noise around them. So as we get ready for the series, just some of your initial thoughts against Minnesota.
Yeah, there's a really interesting disconnect, I think, Alan. I think the vibes and the attention and the feeling would tell you that over the last 30 games, right, like that the Lakers have been one of the best teams in the NBA and have been the better team, right? Like statistically, it's not true, right? Like the statistics, like, offensive rating, defensive rating, net rating, whatever, like all tilt to Minnesota, who have played awesome basketball over the last, 2 months. Now, where it gets interesting, right, is sort of who they played awesome basketball against and when they played it. And I think this sort of explains like the reason why maybe Laker fans are so confident is that the Lakers have played really, really well in big games against great teams. Like that has been, they've beaten the really good teams, they've beaten the really bad teams, and like they've been kind of meh against the meh teams. Like that has sort of been their season, right? Where they've struggled has been in kind of the middle tier of the league. But in big games, and they've played a ton of big games, they've fared pretty well. They've executed at a pretty high level. That was kind of why that Warriors game at home felt like such an anomaly, because they hadn't really lost games like that, at Boston, certainly. But, after, they lost to Cleveland in LA. But really otherwise, like anytime they played a team of any real like sort of like heft, they kind of handled it. And so I think that's probably why people are really confident. But this is a incredibly compelling matchup. They are precisely the type of team that the Lakers, this is where it gets tricky, where some version of the Lakers struggled with. They're athletic, they're tough. They get into you on defense. They make it hard for you to score. The Lakers did not score against them in December. The 2 times they played them, I think they scored like 170 combined points or something like that. Like 2 of their worst offensive games of the year. But then they played them after, they played them they were pretty dominant in LA. But Randall and Gobert didn't play in that.
Sure.
So I think it's interesting. Minnesota, very good team, conference finals a year ago, have kind of everything you would sort of want in a team. But I still think that the Lakers are obviously the favorites. And it feels like the Lakers series to lose. But I think feeling there is not, I think you're right. I think there is like some underestimation here. Like Minnesota's really, really good. It's going to be really hard. I had somebody tell me today they thought Minnesota was like the best possible draw for the Lakers in the playoffs. And it's just like, maybe, but by sort of like, because anybody you were going to play was going to be hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like really. You know what I mean? Like Golden State would be tough. The Clippers would be tough. Denver would be tough. I think Memphis would be the team that teams generally wanted to play.
Sure.
But everybody else is really good, and it's just gonna that's what these playoffs are gonna be. They're gonna test you, and they're gonna test you in different ways on different nights. And I think it starts with a Timberwolves team that I think is pretty dynamic.
What do you think? Because I kind of breaking this down earlier in the week of just looking at some of the strengths for Minnesota. Mm-hmm. They'll obviously have, and frankly, I think the Lakers have done a pretty good job from this perspective, but they'll have a size advantage with Gobert. Yeah. They'll have, their depth is really nice. I mean, to have Naz Reid and Dante DiVincenzo and Nickeil Walker, to have some real talented players coming off the bench. Not that the Lakers don't, but they got great talent and great depth as well. When you look at some of what do you think would be the biggest advantages Minnesota has over the Lakers? And in those advantages, how do Lakers kind of counter them?
I mean, I think rebounding, is always sort of a thing. And I think Minnesota, if they can get to the glass, if they can use their size, is one thing. They can use their physicality. That would be a place I would think I would start. They have interesting sort of defenders, in Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards can dig in on the defensive end. Those guys are going to be switchable. Julius Randle's defense in this series is going to be incredibly important. If he can kind of elevate up into being not a guy that gets targeted, because we know what the Lakers are going to do to a degree, right? Is they're going to try to find advantages and they're going to target those advantages repeatedly. And it's crazy. I mentioned all those people. I didn't mention Rudy Gobert because there is a feeling, and we've seen it happen a bunch in the playoffs, that you can scheme Rudy Gobert out of a series, right? And I think when we look at the way the Lakers in particular, and they're different players, but look at the way that the Lakers went after Sengun when they played him in Houston, right? Or when they played him in LA with Luka, and they went at him, and they went at him in ways that they forced Houston's hand to play small. And I think that's what the Lakers have been able to really do, is that they've been able to kind of dictate to teams, you're going to have to do it our way or else we're going to punish you for it. It was really interesting in the Dallas game. Dallas was reluctant to do it. They tried to stay with their bigs. They had some success, but over time, they found the cracks. They found the cracks, and then they exploited them. And I think that's kind of what I think the Lakers' biggest advantage is, right? Is their smarts and their ability to pick apart weaknesses. Now, you mentioned depth. I think that's a huge thing in this series. I think, particularly can Nickeil Alexander-Walker get going? We'll see what happens with, whether it's Rob Dillingham or Terrence Shannon. Those guys, Terrence Shannon played awesome in that game in Los Angeles. Who knows what kind of crack he'll get in this series, but I think he's the kind of he's big, he's physical, he's fearless. That to me has been sort of the template for players that the Lakers have struggled with at times. Detroit players you know what I mean? Chicago has some of that, right? Like Josh Giddey just kind of going at the basket over and over and over again. Will Minnesota attack in that way? But I think honestly, Alan, at the end of the day, it's just I tend to just trust Luka and LeBron and Austin Reeves to figure it out, but I think it's going to be really, really hard.
By the way, there is something about the way you just kind of simplified it. You just trust them to figure it out. I'm with you. I think there is a little bit of that. It's
sure.
You can look at the some of the. I think Minnesota's top 10 defensive and offensive rating. Yep. They're a good team. And by the way, what's the difference between the number 3 seed and the number 8 seed? It's nothing. So it's not like there's a 6-game difference in the standings.
It's a push. They won 49 games, right?
Exactly. They won 49. Lakers won 150. Luka's first playoff run as a Laker. What do you think? And the way Luka kind of finished off the season, his last 5 games or so, he was phenomenal. Obviously, his performances against OKC, the performance he had against Dallas, and you can just kind of go down the list. He looked, I thought, his most comfortable over the last 5 games, and he also looked like his best as a Laker. First time we're going to cover him as a Laker in a playoff series. What are kind of some of the things you're most excited about seeing once this starts on Saturday?
I think one of the things that I've learned about him kind of here in his first few months in LA, and why I think he's such an interesting fit in Los Angeles, like, is, like, I get into X's and O's stuff a little bit, but like I care more about feeling and people and vibes. That's just sort of the way I approach this job. Is that Luka Doncic like does not want to be famous, right? Like, he is not interested in fame. He is, though, very interested in performing, right? Like, he is someone who like loves the stage and the spotlight and the moment. And that was true before we saw what happened in Dallas. It's just like, it is part of who he is. And the people around him, right after the trade, like, that was something I kept hearing. I heard that from people in Dallas, is that like, this guy is going to like love big games in Los Angeles. He's going to love them. And, Alan, this, you've been in that building. Like, they all feel like big games. Like LA playoff crowds are like, that's going to be something else. And then look, I mean, we saw it last year in the playoffs, like, right? Like, Minnesota is like a hard place to play. Great fans, really, really loyal fan base, loud, tough. You have to be tough to live in a place that's that cold for most of the season. Like, it's just required of you. Like, I that to me is just like, I am so excited to see his response to like the environment, because he's a really interesting personality in the way that he's like kind of shy. He's sort of quiet when you talk to him off the court. Like, and it's not, shy isn't necessarily the right word. I mean, he's speaking his 4th language. So like that's not it. But like, it is more dry and subdued, and like, he's sarcastic, right? Like, he's a counterpuncher, and the way he like moves within like the Lakers like ecosystem. That's not true on the court. Like, on the court, like, he is a menace. And he's just like a killer. And that to me is what I'm most excited to see, is like how that translates like here, especially if you mentioned it. Like, it does sort of feel like he's getting his rhythm, like, fully. Like, he shot the 3 pretty well since he's been in LA, but he's missed a ton of 2s. And that's part of what he does, right? Is like, he's a 3-level scorer. He gets to the line, like, he can really hurt you in every possible way. And early on, it's been he's had like 2 or 3 of maybe the 5 skills have been hitting at the same time. And we're starting to see things like the slow step in the paint, like, finishing around the basket, getting the midi going a little bit, in addition to obviously the step backs and stuff. Like, he's got such a deep bag offensively. And like, I'm most excited to see it, if that even goes up now that the stakes are going up, because that's sort of his reputation. He's a big game player.
Yeah, that's the part I think that's easily most exciting. And I like the way you describe it. That playoff games are just different. He's going to get his first playoff environment in a Laker jersey. It's going to add something. And that has nothing to do with any of the other home crowds or when he was playing in Dallas. It's just, I agree with you. It's going to be at a different level. I mean, hell, their first game is 5:30 on Saturday night for a reason. The premier game against Minnesota, because it is a Lakers.
Yeah, and I think, Alan, like, there's a comfort too. Like, it's not the type of thing where you have to worry so much. Like, is the moment going to be too big for him? Because like, we have, 10 years, dating back to his time in like Eurobasket of like this guy just like loving huge moments. Like, that's just who, like, that is part of what makes him special as a player, is that he's not someone who is going to fold under pressure. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to go play great. I can't answer. Like, we don't know, right? But if he doesn't play well, it's not going to be because the moment was too big.
There's been a lot of chatter, and I think anytime you go through, you get ready for a playoff series and you start looking at everything and you're analyzing certain players, this and that. I don't feel like much is being made about JJ Redick in his first postseason run, which I think is a compliment to JJ. That I don't think many people think it's an issue, or maybe many people think that it's going to be a hindrance to the Lakers. Just your thoughts, your opinion. JJ's first year as a Laker, and then what you expect and kind of his adjustment as he goes into some uncharted territory here, his first playoff run.
Yeah, I think a couple interesting things to monitor. So I was talking to a friend of mine who has been an assistant coach before in the NBA. We were talking about coaching a little bit yesterday, and he'd kind of said, like, everybody runs like the same shit, right? Basically. Like, I mean, there are the things you do that are a little different, but like it's not invention in this way in the NBA is rare, right? It's implementation and stuff is where it gets a little changed. And he said he like basically distilled coaching to like three other things. He said it was like, can you get buy-in from your players? Do you have relationships with them? And are you making good in-game adjustments? You know, and I think the first two for sure, JJ Redick has crushed. Like they've been a bad third quarter team, you know, at times this season, which we'll see. I don't know. You can point to in-game adjustments. I think some of that sometimes is just like you're a little bit of an older team. You're a little flat. You've gotten out to. They've been a very good first quarter team, which like speaks to like really strong preparation. I do think that knowing JJ, knowing the staff, knowing the way that like what they're going to pour into this, like it's not going to be like a lack of brain power situation.
Sure.
Like they are psychopaths. Like seriously, like they are crazy people. And they are going to, and like JJ in particular is somebody who like really, really loves like problem solving, and like what's a better test than this, right? So like, I think if anything, I'd worry that like they try to do too much and like get like too far into the weeds on this type of stuff. But I mean, they've cared about details. They've done such a good job this year, Alan, in terms of like preparation and stuff like that. And I think they've handled the season in front of them as well as they could. And again, I point to the big games, you know, when it came time to scheme for Denver, like they were in a great spot. Now we didn't get to see, you know, Denver's response and how they responded to the response. We didn't get to see that. We didn't get to see that against Houston. You know what I mean? Late in the season when they've had some like schematic success, but like, you know, if we want to go to an earlier version of the team, we saw it in Sacramento, a place that speaking of things that have happened this season that feel like forever ago, this team never wins in Sacramento or hadn't won in Sacramento in forever. And they won their 2 games in a row at like a critical moment in the Kings season and, you know, handled the adjustment between those 2 games. We saw it in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's probably the latest version too you can look at.
Yeah, you know, and look, I don't know that the Lakers would have won that game had Luka Doncic not been ejected. I don't know. It was trending in that direction. You know, like it felt like they had sort of the momentum and that they had figured out ways around the Thunder's adjustments. It wasn't perfect by any stretch, but like they had kind of met the moment. And I think, again, it does. There is this eerie feeling of calm around the Lakers, despite having a first-time head coach, despite having a roster that is relatively new to one another, despite it not being like, you know, I mean, they did this trade, right, in February, and one of the initial sort of spin, I would say, that came out of the Lakers, right? And it's not like you have to really spin why you traded for Luka Doncic, but like one of the like pieces of spin was like, you know, this is about the next, you know, 10 years of our franchise. And if that means we take a step back now, that means we take a step back now. They didn't take a step back at all. You know what I mean? And their immediate championship window got way more open. I think that became pretty clear really quickly. Like the ways that they have to win increased, and I think you know, so it feels like they've kind of handled whatever's been in front of them. So I think that's maybe why we sit here, you know, I'm on the cusp of this series, feeling like, well, why wouldn't they handle this too?
Dan, final one, and I appreciate your time. And I love kind of all the different topics that we got into. I don't even think I've mentioned LeBron yet in this entire.
We haven't mentioned LeBron. We haven't mentioned Austin Reeves. We haven't mentioned Rui Hachimura. Yeah, I mean, like
a lot of the key guys here. But I'm curious just on Bron. You know, I think that one of the things that I've enjoyed watching Bron this season is it's been a really interesting kind of seamless I don't know if transformation is the right way to put it. His adjustment to having Luka, and it kind of his adjustment to, and maybe this just is also a tremendous amount of confidence knowing that, hey, this is one of the guys in the league. And if I got a shot at winning championship number 5 or making a deep run, it's because this guy's got to be his absolute best. But just watching how he's more strategic, I feel like, how, you know what, I'm going to let him do his thing in the first quarter or two, and maybe in the third quarter, I'm going to come out and I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive. Just seeing how he's adjusted his game so easy. I don't know if you've had conversations with him or part of that dialogue of how he has adjusted. What do you make of it? How has he kind of talked about it? Because I think it's one of the things least being talked about with the Lakers is that here is LeBron, like he's been playing with Luka for 10 years, and it's, no problem. You throw anybody at me and I could figure out how to adjust.
Yeah. I do think it's funny, Alan. Like, I think a smaller picture thing, and then I'll try to take on the question at large. Or I'm sorry, let me start with the bigger picture thing. I do think that basketball a lot of times is really complicated. I think look, the Lakers head coach has made a very successful career as a broadcaster by pointing out some of the ways basketball is really complicated. What if we were to like distill JJ Redick's philosophy about the Lakers though this year? It would be like play hard, right? Like that was one of them. Be smart and play hard. Mm-hmm. And I think after the trade, we do know that LeBron hears everything that is said about him. Seemingly, it's really incredible. One of the most incredible things about covering LeBron James is that it's not like he has incredible filters to outside noise. It's that he takes baths in it. He bathes in the narrative. You know what I mean? Is one of the craziest things. And there was a game, I want to say after a game when we were talking, he's just this is bullshit. People think I've never played with great players before. I played with Kyrie Irving, I played with Dwayne Wade, I played with Chris. People thought I couldn't do these things, and I've done them. Really, it just didn't work with Russell Westbrook. It didn't work one time. And for a whole bunch of reasons. But every other time he's been in this situation, he's basically found a way to do it because he has the game to do it. Going into this year, and by the way, he's ceded even before Luka, he was ceding responsibility to Austin Reeves. Which was a really big part of this season. One of probably the 5 or 6 most important moments of the season was basically when the Lakers and LeBron James said, "Okay, go be a star." I think, talking to LeBron about it, it was basically when you have great players who want to play the right way, it's easy enough. And playing the right way means being smart, being selfless, making the right decision at the right moment, stuff like that, right? And I think they're 2 of the smartest players in the NBA. And if we can add Reeves into this too, who's also an incredibly smart offensive player, very crafty, and you can see he's maximized a lot of his athletic gifts. That's to me why they've sort of managed to look like they've played together for a long time, even though they're still moderately basketball strangers, is because they have similar philosophies about the game. They're smart and they know how to execute it, and they care about winning more so than anything else. In that way, it's not been that complicated.
Simplifies it.
Yeah, it's been a pretty simplified approach to it. Now, within this, there's tons of nuance, right? Hitting a Luka Doncic screen at the proper angle, matters, right? These are the little things to create these little tiny advantages that the Lakers want to exploit. There is detail. There's a lot of really, really small details that need to be exploited, and things like that, and organization rates, all this stuff totally matters. It doesn't matter as much as just sort of them having this shared vision for what good basketball looks like and knowing how to get there. And I think LeBron, to me, has been a master at it. I think weirdly, Alan, going into the season, I remember having conversations with people that my favorite version of covering and seeing LeBron James play, and I wasn't there. I'm still a little bitter that I wasn't, was in Paris this summer. And sort of Olympics LeBron, which is you dominate a game while scoring 11 points or 12 points in some ways. And he really, I want to say like around December-ish, after he went away to deal with his foot, to reset mentally and all that stuff, he really started to play more like that. In terms of the way he talked on defense, and like particularly on defense. And I think with Luka now, there are the other things you can start to do. You know, like I am sure I would bet anything that like LeBron James has a great series on the glass because he knows that they're going to need him to pour energy into rebounding the basketball and cleaning up defensive possessions. He's got time, he's got energy, and he's been thinking about this stuff. I just think like his ability to devote more time and attention to the little things because Luka Doncic is so good at doing, and Austin Reeves are both really good at doing the big things on offense is really what gives this team the type of it creates the margins that they didn't have before. You know, we've heard them talk about margins. Like part of it is Luka shooting 9 or 10 threes a game. Like that's a huge part of it. The 3-point rate going way up while still getting to the line a bunch is like one of the ways they've created more margins. Another way they've created them is that they're smart as hell and they know how to cover up for their weaknesses, and their weaknesses force them into intense attention on the things that they're bad at. Like if you're like, they know they're small, like they're not small, but like relatively speaking, they don't have centers and stuff. They know that, right? So they know they've got to be super tight on rotations because they don't have rim protectors. They know that they've got to be really, really intent on boxing out. And we've seen that over the last 7 or 8 games, I think, like where basically like you hit Julius Randle, you don't do it to get the rebound. Like you do it to create a rebound for someone else. And they've gotten so much better at that stuff, Allen. And I think LeBron has been at the tip of that spear for a few months. And he's been the through line in the different versions of this team. When they've been at their best, it's been almost more like Olympics LeBron. That's sort of been and that's why he's going to be a guy who's going to be on first team All NBA ballots this year. You know, certainly going to be on the second team. You know what I mean? But like he's had that good of a season. There have been stretches where he has looked like one of the 3 best players in the NBA because he's been so good at the little things and like the non-box score stuff, particularly on the defensive end, while still like crushing on the other side of the ball.
It's great insight. No, that's a phenomenal way to put it. And I like the big picture and then kind of the smaller picture on it. Dan, I appreciate that. You want to give a prediction? What do you?
No, absolutely not.
All right, I'm going to go.
6 or 7 games. I mean, I think it's going to be a really hard series.
Okay.
I like the Lakers, but I think it's going to be a really hard series.
Yeah, I was mentioning Lakers in 6, but I think it will be a dogfight as well. I agree. I think it's going to be a dogfight. Yeah. But thank you, buddy. I appreciate the insight. Thank you for coming on the show. And we will most likely see you here in one of these upcoming games. So thank you very much.
Let's do it, Al. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Of course, a big thank you here to our partner. Thank you to Brad Wallace and the Wallace Firm as we are in between our 2 interviews today. Great stuff. We got somebody from the LA Times, somebody from the Athletic, somebody covering the Lakers, somebody covering the Minnesota Timberwolves. Just a quick shout out here. Brad Wallace and the Wallace Firm, a great partner. Somebody that's been around now for a couple of months with us here on the YouTube show. Brad, I've actually known since the 710 ESPN days. He used to advertise with me back then. And here he is continuing to support the channel, continuing to support me. I greatly appreciate that. If you are someone close to you who's been seriously injured or is dealing with the loss of a loved one, you should find out what legal options you have. You deserve the absolute best in the business, and that's Brad Wallace and the Wallace Firm. I'll take you a little bit behind the scenes. When it comes to holding insurance companies accountable and maximizing case results, my guy, Brad Wallace, and his legal team at the Wallace Firm, they're the real deal. They consistently win big injury and wrongful death cases. I hope you never need them, but things do happen in life. I'm sure it's a very intimidating and daunting process. We created a URL, wallacewins.com/Sliwa. wallacewins.com/Sliwa. You can go to the URL. You can get an absolutely free consultation. He can help anybody in the state of California. You won't pay them until they win the case for you. So that's another thing to keep in mind. I could also make a personal introduction if that's needed. I know Brad very well. If anyone's ever in a situation or, like I said, I know it's intimidating. Hey, Al, can you introduce me to Brad? My family member or myself, we're in this predicament or situation. The insurance company is trying to take advantage of us. Let Brad Wallace and his team try to help you. Again, wallacewins.com/Sliwa, wallacewins.com/Sliwa. And thank you very much to their partnership. All right, first we got the Lakers side of things with Dan Woike of the LA Times. Now let's get the other side of the equation here, the Minnesota Timberwolves side. Just want to welcome in here Jon Krawczynski, covers the Minnesota Timberwolves for The Athletic. John, what's going on, brother? Thank you for the time.
Hey, good morning. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to this series. Should be a really fun matchup here.
Yeah, it's funny. I look at the series and you'll have obviously a much better gauge and a much better pulse for the Timberwolves side. A lot of people overlooking the Minnesota Timberwolves. What do you think? Is that kind of the vibe that you feel, and is it fair if that is the case?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the vibe. I mean, I think that the Wolves are decided underdogs in this series in the national public discourse. I'm not surprised about that. I mean, given the Lakers and the way they finished the season, given that they have LeBron and Luka, given that the Timberwolves historically are not a very successful franchise. So I think there's a lot of reputation that is involved in evaluating these things before we get going on them. So not surprised at all, but I do think, I think that this is a tough matchup for the Wolves. If you were going to look at the possibilities in the first round, Denver, Houston, the Lakers, like this one in terms of matchups, in terms of kind of strengths and weaknesses, I do think it's an uphill climb. That said, people won't be surprised to hear this from me, but I really think that the Wolves can win this series. I think that they have some counters to what the Lakers do well, to make this at minimum just a very long and competitive series and to possibly win it.
Okay, so let me hit on that then. Some of the strengths for the Minnesota Timberwolves that maybe I think surface people are going to look at. All right, they got some size, got the ability to obviously grab some boards. They got Anthony Edwards, one of the most exciting young players in the league. When you get a little bit more deeper in the weeds, are there some areas that people maybe aren't you feel like the Timberwolves can expose the Lakers on, or areas that maybe individual players that you feel like can have a real impact on the series?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things that really have to happen for the Wolves to have a chance to win this series. And I think the number one thing that the Wolves will go into this with some sort of confidence in is that they can attack this series two ways. They can go big with Rudy Gobert, who has been playing great down the stretch, offensively, rebounding, defensively wise. And they can really try and use that size and him and Jaden McDaniels as another kind of key X factor in terms of a guy who can get into the paint, 6'10", rise up over people and shoot and knock down shots. And so they could go that way. Or if that is not working, I do think they have a pivot to go a little smaller with Julius Randle and Naz Reid in the front court and try to match up small with the Lakers that way. I think they would be pressed from a rebounding perspective if they do that, but it's a way for them to generate more offense if that is what this series requires. So Chris Finch will not be kind of painted into one corner that could work or could not work. So I think that the optionality there is an advantage for the Wolves, but ultimately, I do think that it's going to come down to Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels being able to hurt the Lakers offensively, because I'm sure that at least early, the Lakers are going to load up on Anthony Edwards. They're going to try and get the ball out of his hands, put two on the ball, and force other lesser offensive players to hurt them in the half court. And the Wolves have shown the ability to do that, but it's been a little sporadic. So if they get the Rudy Gobert they've seen of the last 4 or 5 weeks, if they get Jaden McDaniels of the last 4 or 5 weeks, I think they're going to be in really good shape to be able to go kind of bucket for bucket with the Lakers, at least through the first 3.5 quarters of this game.
You know, it's interesting when you say the kind of the smaller lineup, going Naz Reid and going Julius Randle. That's kind of one of the first things that went into my head. I almost feel like Lakers, which is really weird since they traded Anthony Davis and they got Luka Doncic on this team, they've matched up better, it feels like, against more traditional lineups, more traditional centers. Mm-hmm. And But if you try to go small ball on them, and I know this isn't a great example, the Golden State Warriors are phenomenal at small ball. That's who they are. That's kind of what they've been for, obviously for a long period of time. They had some trouble with that. And I know that's just one game as an example, but the traditional I'm more curious about, because I think if the Lakers are not having success against Gobert and let's call it Julius Randle, let's just say they're cleaning up the glass, or Gobert's cleaning up a lot offensively, he's able to get a lot of tip-ins and buckets and things along those lines, then I think you have a problem. But we'll kind of see how that plays out. You mentioned Anthony Edwards. And I you tell me if I'm on the right page here, not watching Minnesota Timberwolves games every night, but it feels like if Minnesota is going to make this a real series and have a shot of winning this series, yes, Anthony Edwards has to be amazing, but isn't it as equally as important as, hey, if Ant's going to get you 28 to 35, that's fine. But don't they got to have 4 or 5 other guys that are contributing? Because I feel like if, hypothetically, if the Lakers said, Ant, if you want to go get your 35 to 40, go get it. But we got to make sure Dante DiVincenzo and Jaden McDaniels and kind of slow down the rest of the pack. I feel like the more that's on Anthony Edwards' shoulders probably plays to the benefit of the Lakers.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Chris Finch talked about this a little bit yesterday at their first kind of practice getting ready for this series, was that they're at their best when Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle are in the hunt for triple doubles, not when either one of them is going for 35 or 40. Like both of those guys individually in isolation situations can go get you a ton of points. But what the Wolves do, or what we've seen the Wolves struggle with, is when the ball movement and the body movement offensively really kind of grinds to a halt while everyone watches Ant or Julius Randle in isolation. And so I do think that there's going to be pressure on Edwards to be a decision maker in this series. I know JJ Redick and that staff is incredibly smart and they're really well prepared. And so I would imagine that one thing that they're going to try to do is try to turn this into a thinking man's game for Anthony Edwards. Luka and LeBron are two of the smartest players to ever play the game. Ant is incredibly gifted athletically. He is dynamic. He has made really big strides from a decision-making standpoint, but I do think that still is an area of growth for him. And so the Wolves would be most dangerous if you get Ant hitting threes, going downhill, scoring at the rim, but also driving and kicking to Dante DiVincenzo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Naz Reid, like all of these guys on the perimeter and kind of getting the ball moving and getting open shots. That's where the Wolves are at their best offensively. And I do think that they're going to have to be a team that wins games offensively sometimes in this series. I don't think that this is going to be something where they can go into and say, we are a very good defensive team, especially in the half court, and we're going to kind of shut the Lakers down. I think they're going to have to score with the Lakers as much as anything in a lot of these games, and that will require Edwards to be the facilitator and the playmaker and sort of the center of the universe for this Wolves offense.
We were watching last year when I'm watching the Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks, and it's Luke obviously leading Dallas. I'm watching it from a different lens and a different perspective. What can a lot of people that are on this channel or on this podcast, obviously Laker fans, but they're big NBA fans as well. Are there some things that you take away from that series from last year that you think apply or no? Because Karl Anthony Towns isn't with Minnesota. Luka's now with the Lakers. But I guess I'm just more curious from a Luka perspective. You got to watch him night in and night out in that, that series against the Minnesota Timberwolves. What were some of the areas that you think made him just so special and that you feel like apply to the series that we're about to play?
Yeah, I think, there's, for Wolves fans who will listen to this, there's an optimist and a pessimist view on it. Start with the pessimist, because I think that's the most likely scenario, is the Wolves are at their best defensively when Jaden McDaniels is at the tip of the spear and really kind of locking down the best perimeter player from the other team. He does that very regularly, but Luka is not bothered by Jaden McDaniels. The way that Luka gets to his spots with how big that he is and how he uses leverage and angles, he just is able to neutralize McDaniels' length a lot better than most perimeter, point of attack offensive players are able to do. And so one thing that the Wolves had the number one defense in the league last year by far, and they just could not get on top of Luka and bother him and get him off of his game. He plays at a pace that he completely dictates. Like there's no speeding him up. There's no kind of rattling him. So he was able to look very, very comfortable in that series, getting his shots, making plays for others, finding Gafford, Lively, Derek Jones for lobs at the rim. It just really gave the Wolves a lot of fits that way. And so I think that's going to continue in this series, or that's going to be an issue that they're going to have to try a bunch of different people on him and just see if they can get him out of any kind of a rhythm at all, because he's so dang good. From an optimist standpoint, I think one thing that you look at is I wonder about Luka's front court options from a lob perspective. The way they are not, Jackson Hayes is not Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively. And so the thing that really prevented the Wolves from stringing together any kind of stops is they had no answer. If you're doubling Luka, he's finding guys at the rim for lobs. If you're staying off and single covering him and trying to play it straight up and protect the paint and the rim, he's just going to get to the elbow, knock down his jumper, and go on about his day. And so how the Wolves solve that issue, it might lean on, is Jackson Hayes just not ready for that? Or is Rui or Vanderbilt or whoever they put kind of in the front court there not the same level of rim pressure person that Derek Lively, Derek Jones Jr., Daniel Gafford were? And that's what I'm going to be watching a lot, especially in game 1 and game 2 of this series, is do they turn Luka, similar to Ant, do they turn Luka into more of just a scorer and less of a facilitator? That's going to be really, really hard to do, but I think that might be the approach here that the Wolves will try to take.
Yeah, I'm curious how much Hayes will be a factor in this series, because I think what you're saying, they know they don't have that front court that Dallas had, and they have kind of seen themselves, they're spreading the floor a lot. So you're probably going to have Dorian Finney-Smith, Rui, LeBron, and Austin Reeves. And that presence down low really won't be there, which how do you think that impacts? I've heard a lot of people say, and you could play Gobert off the floor because of Gobert. You're putting him on these switches, and now Gobert's got to guard one of these guards at the top of the key. What do you think is Gobert's impact in this series? Are people underestimating his impact? I know you said that he's been phenomenal over the last month or so. I've seen some of his numbers. He's had incredible numbers. Does that transfer, you think, to the postseason? Does it transfer specifically against the Lakers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of has to if the Wolves are going to have a chance. But I don't know how it's going to go, because in fairness, like, he's put up some massive numbers. A lot of them have been against Brooklyn Nets, Utah Jazz, like teams that had literally no one in the front court.
Sure.
And the Lakers, I think, for as small as they can be, they're still they're big and they're strong.
They're wide.
Yeah, they are. They are. They have a lot of muscle. And so it's going to be different for Rudy down there. But what he is going to have to do, you kind of hinted at it earlier, but it's going to have to be a situation where he's catching lobs from the dunker spot. And I do think that the Wolves, over the last month and change, Julius Randle, Ant, DiVincenzo, a bunch of these guys have figured out how to get the ball to Rudy and make him more of a factor than just this kind of guy who sits off to the side that you don't have to worry about. So that helps them. But he'll have to do that, and he'll just have to pound the offensive glass. Like, he's going to have to get weak side, tip in dunks, and things of that nature to punish the Lakers for going smaller, like they are, I'm sure, going to do. And he is capable of it, but we haven't seen that for stretches of time against really good teams yet. And so they're gonna need that kind of production from him to kind of really tilt the scales of this series back in their favor and get the Lakers out of some of their comfort zone and make them have to think about, hey, maybe we do have to play Hayes a little bit more just because we are getting hammered there. And as far as like the defensive playing him off the floor, I don't think that's really something that happens a whole lot to Rudy. He's got guys around him that play very well, and so I do think that the ability for him to stay on the floor is there for them. And I know people don't like Rudy. Luka does not like Rudy and loves attacking him, and so that will be interesting to watch. But from what I have seen, I think he can stay on the floor and be a real factor in this series.
I've said this a couple of times, and again, this is one man's opinion, and I'm on the outside looking in. I wasn't crazy about the trade in the offseason. I thought Cat was, a 10-year vet that has been with the Timberwolves, and I thought took some pressure off of Anthony Edwards, and I thought it would allow Anthony Edwards to kind of naturally, organically grow into the player that you want him to be. But the trade happened. Is this roster, you think, just kind of comparing the two rosters, you feel more comfortable before that trade? You'll find out when this series is done. Like, I'm just curious, as you've got a full season without Cat, what was your take now that you look back a little bit on that trade?
Yeah, I mean, the number one take is that just this collective bargaining agreement makes it financially where they felt like they had to do it. And so I understand the logic behind it. This is not one of those situations where the Mavericks traded Luka that was completely incomprehensible. You could see some of the reasons financially for the Timberwolves to do it. That said, I think with Towns, they are different, certainly. They have, I think, a little higher ceiling with Towns because I think he is the most talented player in that trade. And just his offensive efficiency and his kind of sneaky good defense in the playoffs for them last year is something that they miss this year. They miss just having an all-star caliber player at that second spot behind Anthony Edwards to take a lot of pressure off of him. Now, the one thing that has helped them in the trade from a manpower standpoint is you get Randall and you get DiVincenzo, and so they are deeper with this trade. Randall is not quite as good as Cat, but DiVincenzo as a difference-making shooter from the perimeter that is a good defender with size and can move the ball around some is invaluable for them. And so they did not win as many games as they did last year, but the team that they had with Cat, I think, was built specifically and especially to beat Denver, which was the smart thing because Denver was the reigning champions. I think they're more versatile with this group. I think they can win in different ways as currently constructed, even if the overall talent level is slightly down from where Karl Anthony Towns was. So, but ultimately, though, I think your point is that this series is going to be in many ways a barometer of that trade and what they got and how they were going to be able to go forward. If they bow out meekly, there's going to be a lot of regret about making that deal when they did do it, because I think with Towns, maybe they have a better chance against the Lakers. But if they find a way to be resourceful, and if Randall plays well and DiVincenzo is a big factor, which I think he will be in this series, now you look at it and say, okay, like now this wasn't just a financial trade. Maybe they are just a little bit tougher and a little bit more versatile for a playoff run with those two guys.
John, a couple more. We're going to let you go, and I appreciate the time as always. Real quick on the on the Lakers side of things, just to kind of look at how the Lakers have had some success. I've listened to a couple of podcasts that have talked a little bit about this, how Minnesota is in the final couple of minutes of a game, and how the Lakers really, when you got Luka and LeBron, you got Luka and LeBron. So the decisions are going to be at the absolute top notch, and obviously clutch players and guys that have been doing it in the league. If you look at some of the concerns that you have taken on the Lakers and some of the strengths that the Lakers have, what do you make of, if it's a close game with a few minutes left to go, is that just simply, hey, that's advantage Lakers because of those two guys? And how important is it to have a little bit of a breathing room for Minnesota towards the end of games?
Yeah, to me, Alan, this is the biggest discrepancy in the series right now is when you have Luka, LeBron, and even Reeves, who can get to his spots, smart player. You just know the Lakers are going to get good shots down the stretch of these games, and they're going to make good decisions, and they're going to put a lot of pressure on a defense and do what they want to do. Clutch time for the Wolves has been a nightmare this year. They've played more clutch minutes and more clutch games than any other team in the NBA. And if they even were a mediocre clutch team, they'd be the 2 seed right now. They've just lost so many games down the stretch by poor decision making, by kind of predictable outcomes in terms of you generally know that the ball is going to be in Edwards' hands and that he's going to take a shot and usually a step back 3. Sometimes they go in, a lot of times they don't. And so I think the Wolves so far have been so much easier to guard in clutch time situations than the Lakers have been and will be in this series. And I know that Chris Finch is putting a lot of effort into clutch offense in these, games in these practices as they're preparing for game 1. So this series may very well swing on the Wolves, whether they stay true to their character so far this year and be kind of haphazard in clutch time, or whether they figure some things out and are able to execute in a way that they have not yet this year. You just don't want to get into a situation a lot where you're facing and say, okay, we need a bucket. So does LeBron and Luka. Who do you favor? You favor the Lakers 1,000 times out of 1,000 in that situation.
All right, final one. You want to make a prediction here? Are you a prediction guy? You want to give some thoughts on that?
I'm still thinking about it a little bit, but I right now I will say that I believe that, kind of the dismissiveness nationally about the Wolves in this series, I think is misguided. I think this is a 6 or 7 game series. So I would say that right now I could pick the Wolves in 6 or the Lakers in 7. Go that way. I wouldn't feel confident if the Wolves have to go back to LA in the 7th game against LeBron and Luka. But I really believe that the Timberwolves will be a much stiffer competition than I think a lot of people are expecting for the Lakers, and that this is going to be a back and forth series that goes deep into it.
Phenomenal, man. Thank you for the time and really, really appreciate the insight. Look, we like getting both sides here. So
this is great.
I appreciate it, John. Thank you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
All right, thanks. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, that is John right there. Phenomenal stuff from him. Great stuff. Yeah, it's funny. Having Dan Woike on a little bit earlier and getting a chance to talk to him, I kind of, this is one of the first times that I've done it this way where I'm like, all right, let's go back to back with some of these interviews. Obviously today, recording the show, so did not do it live today, but still some phenomenal stuff right there. Okay, so here's what we got. And let me give, I know when I was doing the live show yesterday, I was telling everybody this. So obviously today recorded, put it out at 8 a.m. and went about an hour or so. No show tomorrow. So I just want everybody to know I'm taking the day off tomorrow, which is a Friday. Sammy is going to do his preview video. It'd be a little bit longer of a preview video, and he's going to be releasing it right around when we typically do the show here. So that's going to be available for everybody. No live show tomorrow. I'm back on Saturday. Now, Saturday, I will be at the arena. I will be at the game. And, of course, we're going to do a post-game show for that. So I appreciate everybody taking some time watching the show today. And please do me a favor, subscribe to the channel if you don't mind. Shout out to everybody that's hanging out, subscribing, and everything else. Thank you, everybody. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I will see you guys on Saturday after the Lakers take on the Minnesota Timberwolves in game 1 of the playoffs. Thank you, everybody.